As a bit of a last-minute trip, I saw myself in Canada for just a couple nights, specifically in the city of Montreal in Quebec. So we're going to hit the ground running with a bit of an overview before I talk about it. If you somehow weren't aware, Canada is located in North America, right above the United States, being the second largest country in the world. Montreal specifically falls within the lower part of the Quebec province, not far from the US border, roughly 45 kilometers. Quebec is predominantly French-speaking and retains a pretty unique identity separate from the rest of Canada. It's surrounded by the provinces of Ontario, Newfoundland and Labrador, and New Brunswick, as well as the US states of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. But since I didn't really spend any time outside of Montreal, this video is going to specifically focus on that city because I can't really represent the rest of Quebec as a whole. Montreal is the second most populous city in all of Canada, beginning as a missionary setting until fur trading picked up, located right on the St. Lawrence River. The population is made up of primarily what is known as French Canadians, and it's usually considered the second largest French-speaking city behind Paris. However, there is a large Anglo-oriented community thanks to the influx of English Protestants after the Treaty of Paris in 1763, when what was known as New France was ceded to Great Britain, but its founding goes all the way back to 1642 by the French. Prior to European colonization, the modern city was the site of the village known as Hochelaga, comprising of the St. Lawrence Huron people. Other tribes such as the Iroquois and the Algonquin have roots here as well. So we've come up to the Canadian border, basically in the middle of nowhere, Vermont, to the point that I have no bars here. And there's actually a line. About to cross into new territory, Zach. Now the first thing I want to talk about is the food, specifically poutine. This is the only unique dish that I got to try, but it is a very important one for the city. I definitely didn't expect to love it as much as I did, and it's probably my new favorite non-spicy foreign food I've ever tried. Poutine is a French fry-based dish topped with cheese curds and gravy, but more often than not, folks will add chicken or a vegetable of their liking for extra filling. The place I first got some from was called Montreal Poutine, truly a creative name, and I couldn't recommend this enough. My favorite beer from the long weekend was probably the Sleeman Lager, which can be found in just about any pub or restaurant. You can find this restaurant on what is known as Rue Street, which leads me to wanting to talk about Old Montreal. So we're now in what's considered Old Town Montreal, taking a walk down, seeing what we can find. Old Montreal, and further, the Old Port, are one of the larger nightlife and touristy hubs of the city. This is where you're going to find your old cobblestone roads and colonial buildings, lots of restaurants, bars, shops, and the likes. Some notable sites here include the Bon Secours Market, which is 2 stories complete with a dome, the Montreal City Hall, which is the seat of local government at 5 stories high, and of course the old Molson Bank building. And yes, Molson beer does indeed come from Montreal, being the oldest brewery in Canada dating back to 1786. For this trip I was accompanied by my longtime friend Zach, who also went to Romania with me, and we stopped at Pub St. Paul one of those nights, truly a solid spot, especially if you like rock and roll themed joints. Down here at the edge of Old Town is what's known as Old Port. Makes sense, it's right by the water. A lot of cool architecture and food trucks. You can get a pretty good look at the backdrop of the city from here. Looking towards the port, you'll notice the Jacques Cartier Bridge, which lights up. And it's next to the Montreal Clock Tower. But you know what else lights up? The massive Ferris wheel known as La Grande Roue de Montréal, meant to give a beautiful look at the entire city from atop. You can zip line out here on the Tyrolin Montreal zip line, which is the largest one in all of urban Canada, and it's accompanied by a climbing park as well. Now, we didn't get time to do this, but from the port you can actually see St. Helens Island, which has a theme park with roller coasters, the Biosphere Environmental Museum, which kind of looks like Epcot from afar, and there's even an outdoor gym. Going a little more inwards, you'll find the old Saint Sulpice Cemetery, which is the second oldest building in the city, topped only by Le Berlamoine House, and it's across from the Notre Dame Basilica of Montreal, showing the nation's Catholic roots. This was built between 1824 and 1825, reflecting the neo-Gothic style. I'll be honest, I didn't think it was a whole lot to look at from the outside, probably because by now I've seen so many churches and cathedrals that look more impressive. Doesn't help that it's been under restoration for several years now, but it was absolutely worth a step inside and was relatively cheap to enter. The insides have some of the most beautiful displays that I've ever seen. On the walls are hundreds of paintings, sculptures, and stained glass, and there are loads of points of interest all around the interior to check out and read about. Speaking of churches, Montreal is home to the largest church in the entire country of Canada, known as the St. Joseph's Oratory. And let me tell you, just climbing the steps to get to the top of this thing was a workout in and of itself. Once you're up there, there are more displays and statues that wrap around the grassy areas that the church was built into. This was founded in 1904, built by thousands of workers over 6 decades, completed in 1967. It reflects the Italian Renaissance style, sporting a massive dome and can fit 10,000 people inside. The outer part of the dome is 39 meters in diameter, with its highest point hitting 102 meters, and it sticks about 30 meters above Mount Royal summit. We didn't get the opportunity to go inside of this, but it's full of bright colors and many multi-angled arches, a shrine, and of course the interior of the dome. You heard me mention Mount Royal summit, and this is actually the mountain that sits behind this. And it's actually where Montreal gets its name, if you think Mount Royal, Montreal. I bet part of the reason why climbing up the oratory was such a tiring chore was because before that we did a massive hike around Mount Royal Park. So we've currently made it to Mount Royal Park. It's huge, like literally driving around the thing took like 7 minutes, but it's a lot of nature trails, and I believe if we get to one point we can kind of look out and see the entire city of Montreal. Inaugurated in 1876, you can get a great feel for the nature, plants, birds, and other wildlife that inhabit this general area of Quebec. Near the summit is the Mount Royal Chalet, constructed in 1932 during the Great Depression. Lots of events can be hosted here, and it's not far from the parking lot for those that can't trek too far into the mountain. But since we did, we got to see a lot of the best scenic looks over the entire cityscape, and as you go deeper into the mountain, you get different angles and perspectives and encounter all sorts of neat trails with wooden walkways and bridges sprinkled in. So this is actually larger than we thought. You can still kind of see the city out there as we took a stop earlier to get a look at the entire skyline, but it seems that this place runs pretty deep. Something notable that sticks out from the city is the Olympic Stadium, which you can see clearly from here. This opened in July of 1976, holding 56,000 people as the largest amphitheater in Quebec. This was built for, you guessed it, the Summer Olympics, nicknamed the Big O because of the name and the donut shape that it has. Later, this became home of the city's baseball and football teams, but unfortunately has not been the home of a team since the Expos left in 2004. And it's somewhat known for having caused a lot of financial problems economy-wise. My favorite feature, however, may be the Montreal Tower, which stands at 165 meters tall and sits at a 45-degree angle, making it the world's tallest inclined tower, and it's part of the Greater Olympic Park grounds. Speaking of which, across from that you'll find the Montreal Botanical Gardens, being a total of 190 acres of plants and greenhouses. All of the outdoor gardens have a specific theme and are actually covered with snow for a large chunk of the year. Some of these include the First Nations Garden, which honors the indigenous populations of Canada. Others are plant-specific, like the Alpine Garden, which is full of alpine plants. However, my favorite was probably the Chinese Garden, constructed along the lines of the Ming Dynasty infrastructure, with collections of bonsai and Peking plants, including materials imported from Shanghai, complete with a beautiful view of the water. The gardens were founded in 1931, another Great Depression-era feature, and there are indoor collections as well. In fact, nearby is also an insectarium and a biodome, and thanks to the vast diversity in its gardens, it's considered one of the most important botanical gardens in the entire world. Since I was only here for 2 full days and 2 nights preceded by a night spent in Burlington, Vermont, I didn't really get to see much more than all of this, but this pretty much does cover everything I saw, and I think I got to cram in a lot in just 2 days' time. Whenever I travel to another country, I try to seek out an energy drink. They had one here called Guru, which I'm gonna be honest, I didn't think was very good. And this is also my first time crossing into a country via land rather than through an airport. If you're driving, a little note, parking garages seem to always have the door shut until you drive up and trip the sensor for them to open. Okay, after a whole bunch of confusion, I finally figured out how to park. So apparently all of the doors to like the parking garages are shut, and you go up to it and a sensor kicks it in. Like, it can't just be me being a dumb American, because like no other country I've been to does this. But yeah, if you ever go to Montreal, prepare to encounter that. But overall, it isn't much of a hassle, and if you're a US resident that lives near this border or in the Northeast, I totally recommend taking a trip up here, even if it is just for a long weekend like I did over Memorial Day. Or if you don't live nearby, consider a longer week there and see more than what I got to see. This felt more like a European city despite the North American location. It was full of so much life around cultural roots and old historic trails and beautiful architecture, and I genuinely enjoyed my short stay. Thank you for taking the time to check out Montreal with me. What do you think of Montreal? If you live there, do you think I represented your city decently? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you on the flip side.